right. Nice, noted. So I'm here talking with Charlie. We connected, I feel like we connected a while ago on the Discord, and we talked about having a conversation a couple times, and then you joined the Voxer group, but timing's always different because we're across the world from each other. But we made it work. So we're gonna chat, and you're one of the few I know. One of the things that I know that you were into, the opposite of the other Charlie, is you kind of like the POS theology video. And
I
now,
like how we have the same name.
yeah, now some of
And
my
the
family
opposite.
print something, so you're gonna hear my printer. This will be great.
Yeah,
Um,
fantastic. Sorry, I had the audio issues before.
yeah, but your audio sounds great now. They must have forgotten what was going on. Here, I'm gonna pause this again, and then we'll start.
Yeah, sure. Yep.
All right, we're back recording. The printer's done. Charlie, what's up? What are you thinking? What's going on?
Just going through the process of like understanding what the spiritual side of, I don't know, Christianity actually is now that I'm really into it. I, like a brief sort of background, I grew up out of my own choice Buddhist from the time I was roughly 6. I went to a Lutheran school when I was when I was in high school. My parents were not religious. My dad's a pretty staunch atheist, and my mom's the easiest way to put it is woo. Like everything, like
People.
yeah, Atlanteans and dimension seeking, full meditations, which is really, really fun. It means I can have an adventure with her. And yeah, then Jordan Peterson kind of came onto the scene and kind of threw a lot of stuff around. I was running a poetry night, and with that came a lot of left-wing identity politics. And I was like, yes, all of those things sound right. And then Jordan Peterson started talking, and I was just like, well, he sounds right too. And then I think I spent like roughly 5 years trying to reconcile like what that actually meant. And it eventually, I still don't know how it started at Jordan Peterson and ended with me becoming a Christian. I'm not baptized. I currently just go to a Catholic Latin Mass as much as I can. And I'm sort of going within the throes of that as slowly as possible. It feels like the best way to put it. But one of the...
Intentionally slow?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just with full awareness is the easiest way I can sort of see it. Like one of the main reasons I decided to go on this journey though was because there's I talked to Rafe about this actually as well, Rafe Kelly, and we have a common connection with parkour. I trained that and martial art called capoeira.
Yeah.
And there's something within those movement arts that is spiritual, and same with martial arts. I'm not sure if you have any history with it, but I think there's something like in the sense of any true discipline that someone can put in, they'll find a spiritual element within it.
Yeah.
But I actually found out that there's a strong Christian connection within capoeira itself. And I just was in the middle of me listening to a lot of Peugeot and things like that. I was learning about a musical instrument called the berimbau, and it had heaven and earth, and the music itself, like there were 2 notes, and there are only 2 notes, high and low, and the music is about interweaving these 2, and then you acknowledge the music and interplay itself out. And I was like, okay, so like it felt like there was an actual ability for, I don't know, my body and my breath and sort of that movement type spirituality to sort of be communicated into a larger context within Christianity. And it was really interesting. Like there's this thing, and I really wonder if Rafe and John Viveki have this. And every now and then, like I'm worried that Like there's like a worry that I have that the Christianity that I think or that I thought about, that I had the caricature of, is the real Christianity. I'm just being told enough to start believing it, so that when I'm in it, we're back here. And I think that's an interesting thing.
The Christianity that you are, that you know, that's just somewhat in the ether, in the culture that's out there, that everybody, the kind of Christianity that all the new atheists reject.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all of that type of stuff is in the POS theology. Like, it feels like those are the things that turn education into almost brainwashing, that turn relationships into conditions, that turn sort of activities and responses into shame complexes, and spiral everything out of control. And it's just like, because a lot of the times, like, a lot of, like, I don't know how to put this, but the caricature of Christianity is just like the God that like judges you when you masturbate.
Yeah.
And like the Dylan Moran's this Irish comedian, and he like has this thing of just like the Catholic person in a party is just like going, oh no, there's a cookie, oh it's over there, and I'm walking to it, oh I can't help myself, and it's just like the guilt just compounding on it. And it's because there's interesting things, because like Christianity still, like, the structure is still there, like the rules and mandates are still there, but the shame complex and stuff like that, it definitely doesn't seem like that's meant to be a part of it, if that's the easiest way to put it. But
Yeah. Well, there's, I don't know. I mean, obviously, I've gravitated toward orthodoxy and a lot of the Eastern aspects of Christianity, and that's always been something for me that I don't know. It's interesting because I feel like you're the type of person who were you ever watching Paul? Sorry, Paul gave me so much shit too in the last video where like he was commenting on that randos video because I don't finish my sentences. So when we were doing
I didn't see that.
he was just he was giving me crap because he does that too, but I don't. My mind's like I got like 3 tracks going on, and I just cut them off and start going with something else. But were you around or were you exposed to Nathan Jacobs? Did you ever see Paul talk with him or anybody talk about him?
Talk about him, definitely. I don't think I could zero in on a video that he did.
He's had 2 conversations with Paul, I think. Well, I mean, now he's a filmmaker, and he's an Orthodox and kind of early church father, patristics. Like he went to school for that, and now he makes films. He did a documentary called Becoming Truly Human, which I still haven't seen actually, but then he based on that documentary, he put out or he recorded these 3 lectures that he put on to the Orthodox Church in America. So I'm Orthodox and I'm within the OCA. And so my priest was actually at these lectures, and it's called Reaching the Nuns. I'll send you links to it sometime, but he goes through the nuns who are technically those people who, when they give them surveys, you know, like, are you religious or atheist or nothing, or, you know, and so these are the nuns. These are the people that are just done with religion in general. So it's not like or there, I guess there's duns too, but there's these are people who just don't identify. They're kind of like the spiritual but not religious type people, you know, like still believe in, and interestingly, they still believe in, you know, like karma and things like that, but they don't believe in technical religious traditional structures. And he just has these 3 lectures on it, which is really awesome, I think. And I think that's a good distillation. But to get at what I think like is going on with you and with a lot of people, it's interesting because the more that I've moved into Eastern Christianity and kind of got out of my I mean, people have called the internet kind of Gutenberg 2.0, right? So
Oh,
it's not just a coincidence that the Protestant Reformation happened right after the printing press, right? And I think there's also kind of another, I don't know what you'd call it, a Reformation and Enlightenment. There's definitely something happening in light of the internet, and I think predominantly coming out of long form conversations and like this whole Jordan Peterson phenomenon. And I think what's happening, and if you look at Paul Vanderklay's community, is there's people from all sorts of backgrounds and communities that are,
that's my favorite thing about it.
huh?
It's my favorite thing about it.
Yeah, it's awesome because, and what's awesome about it is because it's not, I mean, you essentially, all the stuff that you're talking about being like hyper narrow and ideological and controlling and potentially manipulative, like that's all stuff that I talk about. That's like the tools of technology and mammon. I mean, that's mammon. That's mammonistic knowing, when you're trying to control what people think through your structures and institutions, like that's messed up. You can't, with the internet, you can't really do that anymore. And so, at least for people that are inquisitive, some people are still going to be just playing that game. And so all of that to say is like, there are people, I don't know, it's interesting. I often find that I can relate to almost people who were raised spiritual but not religious or outside of the church or whatever, like people like you. There's a lot of times people like you that I just really connect with, and like when you start talking about God and spirituality, I'm just like, yep, like all that stuff, it's just clicking. And and I don't, but I still am within, I'll wrap it up with this, but like John Vervaeke, he talks about, I think essentially what has happened is he talks about like there's religio and credo. When he was talking about that, when he had, I think he brought this up in his conversation with Jordan Peterson, but like the Philo-Nicaea and the Philosophia, like
the greatest podcast ever. Yeah, that one.
And but he said like the religio is really like the thing that binds. It's the thing that's underneath it's like the mystical bridge between any form of communion is the religio. And it's almost intrinsically mystical because it's irreducible to something you can name. And then the credo is the thing on top of that is meant to serve, it's meant to serve the binding, it's meant to serve the unifying, the creeds. But I think what happened very often in a lot of the Christianity that I grew up with and that you were exposed to and that most people reject is this Christianity that used credo as a means of control and manipulation. And a lot of times unwittingly. I don't even think they were intending to do that. But essentially that's like confessionalism. That's my critique of confessionalism.
So, okay, confessionalism I do want to pick up on. The Credo Religio, it immediately reminded me of the IDW.
Okay.
Like there was these thinkers, they were all talking to each other. There was this network happening, and the moment they gave it a name. The moment it was given a structure, it's like it started falling apart then. It's just like at the moment that Barry Rice did the picture of Dave Rubin's standing in a succulent, it started changing and stuff like that. I wonder, because I'm going to use that to try to circle back to how you started, because I think it's a really interesting narrative. I wonder if the reason things fall apart now is because we allow them to have a credo faster. Like the intellectual dark web was not allowed to organically grow itself. It wasn't allowed to implicitly grow. Like I've been watching Richard Rowland and Peugeot talk about the universal history, and they talk about how like if you ever read a document, it's like, oh, this happened in this year. They started doing it in this year. If they started doing it in that year, add another 200, 300 years, and that's when it started. And it's like, otherwise that structure doesn't like otherwise that structure just wouldn't have happened. It would have been immediately forced onto people. I think there might actually be something within that about how some places, it feels like within Christianity that there is something within how immediately a type of denomination wants to identify, and like the veracity of their identification almost is directly correlated to how intensely they indoctrinate and dogmatize and structure everything to be specific.
Yeah.
But there's an interesting thing with there's something I think about with the internet really frequently, which is about narrative. So the idea of like Gutenberg was you could promulgate information.
Mm-hmm.
I think the difference with the internet is you can promulgate a full narrative. Like it's like that moment in Inception where they're talking about dreams and how they can get to that point before we recognize and create, and they can just be within this one point. Like the internet's able to maintain someone's attention forever, theoretically. And so that's why you can have people be QAnon and lefties and all of this types of stuff. But I agree that eventually what that does is it turns the currency away from information, which I think Gutenberg is the sort of exemplar of that, into narrative. And I think the reason why Jordan Peterson and became such a popular figure, and Joe Rogan as well, I think, is what is the thing that comes through the most if left to its own devices, if there isn't any of this external control. And maybe even with that external control, it's true. Like it has to be. Like the thing that lasts is the truth. And so like there is something that I think that comes out within that Reformation, because everyone's just like, oh, we can promulgate all this independent information. It's all of this information. But because there's no way to potentiate a narrative, people can just construct their own. They just have that information and they built their own. And that kind of does explain the Reformation a little bit. But with the narrative forms, it is more nested in a story. It's more nested in something that has a continuum, has a the word I want to use is transcendence, but I think it's the wrong word. It has something that is outside of itself.
Well, it has, so it has both. I want to play with the word narrative, because this is something that Vervaeke's talked about, which I really like. And I made this distinction. He was having a conversation with someone, because that's I'm pretty sure Vervaeke said this, that essentially he thinks a valid critique of postmodernists is that narratives are used for control. So they have this aversion to narratives, and I think that's true, because so I don't know if you're using that in the exact same way, but I like to draw the distinction between narrative and story. The story is what is. And so like in the internet with Peterson or Rogan or whatever, and on YouTube, you're just putting out so much content. Like, I mean, how many podcasts does Joe Rogan have out there? There's a lot, and I've listened to quite a few of them, like I don't listen to him every time religiously, but I've listened to a lot of them, and I like Joe. But the thing is with the internet is when you put out that much content, to compare it to Gutenberg, you put out that much information, and it's also not just necessarily words on a page, but it is words connected to voice and tone and body and inflection and all this stuff. There's all this extra stuff going on, and when you're putting out that much, it becomes not just information, not just narrative, but it's almost as if it becomes iconic. It's almost as if he's he is actually being transmitted in it. And I think books can do that. Lots of different things can do that. But this is, I'm trying to draw a few pieces together. So like what I think, I've been talking to this guy, Jedediah lately, and you watched me, my conversation with him, I think.
Just
And
finished it before we had this.
nice. He's really interesting. And he and Nate Heil were talking, but he's been wanting to have these conversations. And I think we're going to have one coming up, like maybe he and me and I and Cal. And, and I think we're going to talk about this iconic versus archonic thing, which I think is huge. So like we're kind of talking about iconic vision, which is one of my big things, versus archonic. And so I'm trying to weave all this together. So like I think, and I think this is true, this just came up recently, but technology is essentially magic. Like I was saying this to my wife, like if you'd take this to like a cell phone or a computer or anything, a lot of our modern technology, and just transport it like 10,000 years in the past, they'd be like, you're a wizard.
The way that I put it was the quote, magic, technology sufficiently advanced is like as close to magic as we could get.
Yeah.
Then I said, and then I was just like, you can just reverse that. Magically sufficiently in advanced is just considered technology.
Yeah.
Like, what's the difference between an electronic computer device that is a phone and a stone that would do the same object? We would treat it the same way.
Yeah. And so what I think happens, and this is all connected to credo, I think, and religio, is that there's a way, a creed, in a sense, like the abstraction, the narrative, the thing that you're extracting from the religio, because you're taking this lines, it's an abstraction, and then you can use that as a shorthand. It's something that you can use as a shorthand to try to communicate this thing that is irreducible. It's Barfield would call it like a representation of the unrepresented. The unrepresented is this thing that is unrepresentable because it's too big. It's like maps and territory. Jordan Peterson talks about that. Like reality is too big. You can't reduce it. And so you put names on things to make it usable. But I think this is what the postmodernists have right, is that I think in a lot of the West, I think that we have gotten to the point where we've used language as a technique. Jacques Ellul talked about this, and he called it la technique. And I think you use it, la technique, mammon, currency, magic, but it's all used for an expedient transaction to get something.
Okay.
And that's fundamentally different than religio. And I think what's happening to bring all that back to like Rogan and these podcasts and what I think is happening, in a conversation, and like a long form conversation, it's really hard to like use a shorthand ideological category to Kathy Newman someone, because you're sitting there having a conversation with them. Like if you were to like put some label on me or call something to me that I didn't identify with or that I thought was wrong, live, we can just correct that and work through it, because we're like, so much more of our whole person is engaged through this technology, whereas a book or a blog, if you're just blogging back and forth, there's so many limitations. So I think that's part of what's going on with this enlightenment or this re-engagement. And so like this creedal, shorthand, abusive, potentially abusive, sometimes abusive, not always, form of Christianity is people are getting past that, because they're starting to have so many conversations with people that are practicing different forms of Christianity. It's like, and the last thing I'll say is like the first minute that Paul played in one of his recent videos of that Rafe Kelly conversation with Vervaeke, I just made the comment, and like he just went over it a few different times, and I just made the comment where I was like, well, that's mystical Christianity. So
like I was talking to my sister last night, and I was like I was trying to explain to her how I arrived to sort of becoming regular church going, and I was like slowly doing it, and then I found this answer, and then she's like, a giant man in the sky. And I was just like, like that's not it. It's not it. There's a difference. Okay. There's an interesting thing that I think you point out, that I think that you're pointing towards within the idea of like, you've read Tolkien, narrative and story. I would change to allegory and applicability.
Okay.
I can't remember the exact quote, but Tolkien said that allegory is like applicability is in the mind of the reader. So it is relating to what the reader can actually extract out of the story and the connectiveness it has. Whereas allegory is the forced intent from the author.
Yeah.
As in, like, you cannot interpret it other ways. Like, oh, Aslan was meant to be Christ. That's allegory.
Yeah.
He's not meant to be Richard the Lionheart, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Whereas if you could ask any Tolkien scholar, like it's in the book as well, is like if you ask the elves for advice, they will say both yes and no.
Yeah.
And like that's true. It's just like the Aragorn is like the symbol of like royalty coming back into sort of Europe. Yes and no.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. Like it's kind of like how like we always talk about the 4 P's of knowing, and how you just can't, you'll never get rid of propositions. Yeah. But the problem is the proposition that, like, you can take a proposition as an allegory, or you can take it as applicability.
Yeah.
Whereas, and the way I think you can differentiate it, and the way I think you actually see it, especially when to go back to Rogan and everything, and all of these people with Peterson, is it's less to do with what they say and more to do with the fact that we can develop a relationship with them.
Yeah.
There is more room within what they talk for us to be there and take what we want. We're not told to take a specific thing.
Yeah.
Like if we read a book a certain way and they're like, well, you completely missed the point, then it's just like, well, I'm not going to talk to you like that. It's like in the same way that if I assume something about you, you're like, well, I'm not going to engage with you if you continue to like just assume that because, I like this person, then obviously I must believe this laundry list of ideologies that don't even congruent. Right. There was something really interesting that you said about the iconic. And I actually don't think I've heard you talk about this part of it. I've heard you talk about icons as a portal into sort of an intricate symbol system, and that makes sense. But you actually said that it comes in.
No, go on that. Keep going. Keep explaining.
So when you see like the idea is like all of the data and information of like someone, the idea of the iconic vision is that they actually present themselves to you. Like there is something that is not just there is something that has a larger truth than just the information.
Oh yeah. There man, I'm trying to remember. I was just watching, I haven't finished it yet, but Nate and Jedediah spoke like this conversation where they were riffing on this, and they used an illustration that I thought was just really good, and I can't remember right now, but because they were talking about the thing that's hard is, and this is why I've always liked Barfield so much, and what I mean by iconic vision is it's really hard to describe. It's almost like when we were talking before earlier on the Vox or whatever, and I was saying how I have a really hard time. I've never been particularly good at articulating things with precision, of being able to, I'm not great at naming things. It's kind of like, the vision itself is just seeing the thing. And so to relate it to what we were talking about with an iconic vision is to play on your applicability and allegory, is the applicability is an icon. It's something that's true. It's symbolic, because it's like someone can read Lord of the Rings or watch, or they'll watch Joe Rogan or or like what I was thinking about when you were saying it is I was like, it's the difference between, because I love Cormac McCarthy and I just reread The Road, which is probably like my favorite book of all time.
Oh.
And I was like, it's the difference between The Road and like an Ayn Rand novel. So like Ayn Rand has, like, it's more like an allegory. I mean, she has an agenda with her writing. Her fiction,
Yeah,
her fiction is a foil to her political ideology, right? To her philosophy. Like
yeah.
it's the fictionalized version of objectivism, which is pretty much what a lot of Christian art is, which is why people reject Christian art, because it's not really art. Art is
Mhm.
a applicable portal, and it's true. Like, it doesn't mean that it's just, it is relative in that it's personal, because I'm going to read, if I were to read The Road or Lord of the Rings or anything artistic, we're objectively looking at the same thing.
Yeah.
If you go to a book club, everybody brings different things out of that and sees different things, because we're all unique persons. And so
Yeah.
what comes out and is salient to you is different. And then it applies and it's necessarily subjective.
Your participation is necessary within applicability.
Yes.
Whereas your participation is contingent with allegory. If you try to read Atlas Shrugged with any other interpretation, you won't be able to get it. I don't think you'd be able to actually read it.
It's colonizing rather than liberating.
Yeah, definitely. It's like, you actually have to kind of almost obey it in a certain way. Like,
rather than to be co-creative with it. And this is why I mean, and you and I talk about this, I couldn't agree with you more. Like, my understanding of a lot of Christianity is, I mean, it truly has been shaped by a couple things. One of the biggest ones is C.S. Lewis's Space Trilogy, which I love, but then also the beginning of the Silmarillion,
like, oh.
Yeah. And we were talking about that this morning, and it's I mean, I recommend anyone read it. That section is relatively brief.
Yeah, it's like 4 pages.
So beautiful, because it's like there's a way that you can be. And this gets hard to talk about, because there's a way that you can be in harmony with the original music that was playing, and you can be co-creative with it, and you can riff and you can play with it, but there needs to be harmony. But this is the thing that's crazy about it, is even if you play discordantly with the harmony that's there, like Melkor, it gets woven back into the harmony, and greater harmonies and levels come out of it.
Yeah.
Like what you mentioned, God meant for good. It's that verse in Genesis in the Bible where Jacob, or where Joseph, gets sold into slavery in Egypt. All his brothers sell him into slavery because the coat of many colors, and they're jealous. And then he goes down there and ends up getting up to like the second in Egypt and saves all this grain and then Israel comes down there to eat later. And he saves Israel, saves Jacob, saves the whole nation, Abraham's descendants, through his brothers selling him into slavery to the foreign power. And so there's like this greater good that was meant. And ultimately, at the end of the day, like, this is why, I don't know, partially it's why I'm a universalist, partially it's like you can play, so it's a yes and no, right? The elves.
Yeah.
Can you play a discordant note against God? Yes.
And
no. Because
and no, it's like it will come out. It reminds me of a story Alan Watts talked about, where an old farmer gets a new bull.
Yeah.
And everyone's like, oh, that's great. And he's like, maybe. And then his son tries to rear it in and gets bucked off, and he breaks his arm. And the bull runs away. And they're like, oh no, that's terrible. And he's like, maybe. And then the bull comes back with 3 more cows. They're like, oh, that's amazing. He's like, maybe. It's like,
right.
There is something really interesting in this. I think it is to do with that relationality. Like, John Vervaeke's like academic description of love was something that I thought was actually really incredible, because that could have been pretentious so quickly, or that could have been like cold very, very easily, but he managed to sort of do something really precisely and still like capture it in like a romantic setting of like the idea of like, I make space for you in me, and like that relationality. That is where I kind of actually see a genuine applicability. Like the unfortunate thing for like, you know, in that case with a lot of people in Rogan or Peterson is that I'll never engage in a genuine relationship with Peterson.
Yeah.
And Peugeot talks about this. It's like there's a genuine problem within that point, and that's like something that we kind of figure out. But is it the idea of like an icon? To me, then an icon separates itself from an image as something that you can have a relationship with. And the way in which an icon separates from an idol then would mean that it's you separate the idea from the image itself, or how would you go with that? Like an idol seems to indicate a transcendent but be contained at the same time.
Well, that's almost more, I think technically that's probably more of like what an icon is. It's
Okay.
simultaneously transcendent, but also manifested in a
Mhm.
seemingly static image. And truly what's, you know, there, so within the church there are like official icons that are made and painted, and you know, and
Mm.
that
Oh,
Peugeot
you
does.
guys have the best. You guys
Yeah,
have the best.
that that are meant to train you in that. But like I think what is, and Nate said this beautifully in that conversation with Jedediah, and it's kind of what his whole Grail country thing is about. But like in symbolically in the crucifixion and when Christ was sacrificed for the world,
Mhm.
blood poured out, like the idea of that was kind of like into, there's all this beautiful symbolism where like it was poured out into the earth, and then the earth itself that received his blood became the chalice, which is the Grail, which like
Okay.
regenerates all things. So like in his death he was regenerating all of the earth. And so in that he was saying, and even, and you get all this symbolism because even in the, like Nate was talking about, he's so good with so much information I don't have, but he was saying like in the Holy of Holies in the temple in Jerusalem, there were all these rules of stuff you weren't supposed to do. So you weren't supposed to like mix linen with wool, you know, there was all this in Judaism, you know, there's no mixing. But he said in the temple veil, like it was mixed.
Mm.
And then when Jesus was crucified, you know, the veil was split and rent in two. And so it was like, um, what he said, he went through this long riff, and he said essentially what all that is saying is that in Christ, everything everything became an icon to the Father. So like it's not everything is icon,
Mhm.
because the whole world has been redeemed. Like there isn't this, and people talk about this with like
The
the,
world is full of his glory.
yes, yeah, but we just don't yet have the consciousness or eyes to see it. The iconic vision is like the saint where are, he just sees Christ everywhere. So like one of my favorite, I love Terrence Malick, and he has in his movie, I'll send you this too, but it's just a clip on YouTube. He has
Mhm.
this in the movie To the Wonder. He has this scene where it's Javier Bardem plays this priest, and 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 in beautiful Malick style, he's just like going around doing all these priestly things in this very mundane way. But he's just saying, the Javier Bardem is just saying the prayer of St. Patrick in Spanish, like dubbed over the scene, you know, with all these shots from Malick. And so the prayer of St. Patrick is, you know, like Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ when I rise, Christ when I lay down. And that's essentially, that is what the saint is the one who truly, and not just like in a mere professional empty way where you're just saying the words
Mhm.
devoid of like truth. But like when you get to the point where you're seeing, and seeing in such a way where it's not just like mere intellectual consent, but like it affects action in a way where you see Christ in everything. You really
Yeah.
see Christ as having redeemed all things. It's
It's
like,
further up and further in. Like, to me, that's further up and further in, because if you were to engage with something truthfully, you like, it affects you internally. Like if something is really affecting, it affects you. The more internally it affects you, the more it affects you. The
yes,
more emotional, the more internally it understands itself. And yeah, like the greater sort of participation that you have with it. Like,
which
the
is
further
why
up.
objectivism is so satanic.
Yeah.
Because it's meant to, what it tries to do is like eradicate the subjective.
Yeah, yeah, it really
Like
does. It
the
goes like,
opposite of
my
what we
opinion
should
doesn't
be
matter.
doing.
I'm like, oh,
Yeah, no,
it's
and
the strangest thing to argue about with people. It's like, your perspective is necessary, and then they're going, I don't think so, and I'm like, how is that coming out of your mind?
right. It's well, and this gets into, I think, and I hope these conversations go there. I really think the iconic vision versus archonic is important, because the archons are like
Is that
this,
arcana?
huh?
Arcana or
Archonic, so like archon, like a spiritual power, like a demon, like a principality, archon. Because even in the Greek New Testament, actually, like if you read, I'm a big David Bentley Hart fan, and not just because he's Orthodox. I just like him, but he,
very popular these nowadays?
yeah, but like in, like I think that's what the translation, but like in the New Testament, that's one of the words that's often translated.
Hmm.
How does it get translated other ways? But archons are just like, it's a in the hierarchy of angelic hierarchy, like an angel.
Okay.
And so like when you are, and this is very in line with like the C.S. Lewis space trilogy. I love it. If you haven't read it, you should read it. But
Need to, yeah.
I think that a lot of these movements and spiritual patterns that we see are really the product of angelic influence. And so like when you, something like objectivism is a demonic,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's really rooted in like a person. Like when I say mammonistic knowing or mammon, like I
Well,
think there's an angel mammon.
yeah, because this is the interesting thing, because like, the more I think about Christianity, the more I think it's true, the more I sort of try to reconcile the fact that it has everything. Like, the really great thing about the panentheism
Mm-hmm.
is that like, it feels like you can engage everything with full love, because it's glory is there. There is definitely always going to be glory there. Like,
Christ in you, Christ in this, Christ there. It's the
yeah,
only way it is.
that's really true. But oh god, I'm losing it again. The way in which, oh sorry, what were we going on before?
Archons,
The archons.
the angels, yeah, and like man.
Yes, the pattern of reality has to be entirely within Christianity, and so that also includes this Augustinian idea. The seed is there, and it can grow badly.
Yeah.
I still don't. I haven't really talked to many people like this, and I'm still trying to reconcile it in my head. But what do you think it means to live in the fear of God? Because I think that's where the seed comes from. I think that's the smallest point of it. Because the way that I see fear within a panentheism thing is the way that Tolkien talks about it on fairy stories. Like, a fairy story, a fairyland is a perilous realm. The fairy and fear etymologically connected.
Yeah.
So I see fear and awe having that same relationship then, and that ability, and that's why that there is something fantastic. Like, if you're in the fear of God, like you can actually, you're in a position where you can witness like something fantastic. But something fantastic is also something incredibly dangerous.
Yeah.
And I think it has to be. Otherwise it's a light show.
Yeah. No, that's a good way to say it, I think. So I mean, I totally agree with that, because like this is something that I think people who really are so pro reenchantment, as we talk about it, the
Mhm.
reenchanting of the world, which Malcolm Guite, who's a poet, who
I
he
saw the. Mm.
yeah, he said, and I like this, that he said, we don't need to re-enchant the world. It's enchanted. We just need to have like the calluses removed. Like
Yeah.
we're deadened to it. It's essentially like it's so interesting. I think
I. Mm?
one of the greatest demonic deceptions is making us believe, well, and this gets into like our little group talks about this, the Rudolf Steiner, I think, I'm not great at talking about this, talked about the difference between like the Ahrimanic and the satanic deceptions, and I think the I'm gonna maybe mess this up, but like the Ahrimanic is to basically deceive you with the idea that like spirituality and God and demons and all that's not real. So like
Hmm.
he's perfectly content to deceive you with that. And then the other satanic deception is to deceive you with um it's not so much that all these things aren't real, but that God isn't good or he's lying or something. But
Oh yeah. So there's like disconnection versus upside down.
yeah. So to answer your question though, the fear of God, I think it's a I think we all the stuff that you were saying was great. It's awe, it's real, it's not necessarily safe, That's because that's the thing, is like a re-enchanted world isn't gonna be safe when your eyes are opened to everything being alive in Christ, and then like
Mhm.
but like all the danger and the glory and the tragedy that's happening within all of that is terrifying.
Yeah, you're engaging in a drama. Like you're gonna feel more. Like it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's going to get further out
You're
and
not going
further
to
in.
be you're just not going to be numb anymore, I think. And that's
Mm.
part of the fear of God is um is being awake to that constant intensity, but yet at the same time having the peace that passes understanding, and having
Mhm.
like lean not unto your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him and he will make your paths straight, like that
Yeah,
proverb. It's a
but that see that's a line that you can turn into objectivism.
how so? What do you mean?
Lean not on your own understanding,
Yeah.
but put all your pathways unto Him. If you were to disconnect that from sort of the context that God is a relational being and you actually
Yeah.
see Him within your full participation, then you would, and like if you consider that in a place of diminished self,
Yeah.
then you consider then that lean not on your own understanding means don't trust your own subjective opinion. Just like the world around you, the God in the big G sense, the idea of everything. That's
Yeah.
the objective world. Remove your understanding. That's like, see, that's where the seed can come from.
Well, yeah, but here's the problem, and Cal was talking about this really well recently, because the thing is though, is like you can't ever there is that deception, I think, that you can turn into objectivism, but it never really works if you follow it all the
Mm.
way down, because like you're still present in that. You're still the one leaning.
Yeah, it's still, yeah.
And and like the peace that passes understanding, yes, it passes your understanding, which is necessarily beyond your ability to bring it down and your idea to conceptualize it,
Yeah, you can't doubt it though.
but
You have to believe it.
you're
Yeah,
experiencing the peace. I mean, it's like
yeah.
it's it's that's ultimately what faith is again, it's not devoid from the propositions and the ideas and the understanding, but it's not reliant on those. Like those creeds are always going to be there,
Yeah.
but the peace and the relationality and the trust and the leaning and the fear and all those are all, I don't know, like Michael Lady used to talk about this all the time, and Barfield is big on it. And like this was a big debate between Lewis and Barfield actually, but verbs and nouns, like all of those
Mm.
are verbs. Like you got to do it. Like it's
Yeah.
inherently subjective. It's not like but it's also not subjectivist. It's not just like my feelings and my opinions and like whatever I think is just
Yeah.
like where to go.
Yeah. It's like pain. Pain is a subjective experience.
Yeah.
But you can't deny it. If you're not unless you numb yourself to it, you can't ignore it.
Right. So it's there, it's true, it's subjective, but then I think the subjectivism is to divorce yourself from the other, from relationality, and just be like, my pain, my experience, anything that you have to say.
Yeah.
Like, and that's where you like, there's errors, there's
allegory, applicability again.
Yeah.
Like my interpretation of Lord of the Rings is correct. Your interpretation is incorrect.
Right.
Like, and there is no middle room. Like, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
It's an incredible thing that you get to talk about, and it's very interesting. Like Jed said it to you. Very strange how I'd like. I was listening to you guys talk like an hour ago, but Jed said to you, like, I didn't think this Christianity was on the table.
Yeah, no.
I also agree with what you guys were saying, where it's like everyone does believe this, but they don't know that they believe this.
Yeah. The thinking,
like
that's the thinking versus believing distinction. Like you can't, I think you can't conflate the two. Like the believing is the deeper thing. It's like, and this is a lot of that. I mean, Jordan Peterson was talking. I mean, a lot of that is the act as if.
Yeah.
The like divorced ideas, and that's the piece that passes understanding. Like that's the believing is where
because I had this one of the thing that I talked about with Rafe. The thing that I talked about with Rafe a lot was actually faith, because I think within a physical framework, you have a better understanding of faith than in an intellectual theological framework. Like when you're staring at like a 2.5 meter jump distance with a 3 meter drop, and you're gonna run and jump, like it's not confidence that you have to have. It's not trust. There is this thing that is faith, and it makes sense to me, because faith isn't an appeal to ignorance, or it isn't an admission of ignorance. Faith is a trust in something.
Yeah.
But the thing about that is like I started talking about this with a friend, and a person doing a jump can have all the faith in the world. He still might fall. Like faith isn't guaranteeing that you're going to make the jump. Like I said, faith isn't guaranteeing that you're going to make the jump. But without faith, you won't jump.
Yeah.
Without the ability to put yourself and trust the world and actually have this like important action and extract your reality into it and embody it and act on it, like you said, you won't be able to, you won't do it. And that's why, like, I think then that's why the universalism comes into play. It's just like, Paul Vanderklay spoke to me for like 3 seconds in one of the meeting rooms, and like immediately we just dropped this idea, like Thomas Reid on me, and and he was just like, common sense realism is like, you can tell me what you believe all you want, but that's not going to change what you actually believe. Like what you do, how you gauge the world and how you change the world, that's what you believe.
Right.
That's what you truly believe. And I think a lot of the times, like people's belief structures and systems, in the same way that you meet someone ideologically minded, like majority of the time you meet like an SJW or something like that, they're genuinely like incredibly kind and compassionate and engaging. You just need to say one holy word, and then bang, like you just need to say Jordan Peterson, and then all of a sudden you disappear as a person, and you become you become like a demon. Like you become like this thing that's pushing itself against it. Like it's really interesting, because like I think at the center of it there is this, at the center of everything there is love, and like that's it. Like God, like the idea of like the God is everything and everywhere, because Otherwise, it wouldn't be next to each other. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to see them together. Like that whole idea of the
Relationality. There wouldn't be. I mean, that's really ultimately at the end of the day. That's. I mean, yeah, it's unity and multiplicity. That's what that is. Which
yeah,
is
standing.
which is another way. I mean, it's a more technical way to say love. Like, what is
Yeah,
the thing that binds
yeah,
different things together, and the space in which they move, and in which we live and move and have our being.
yeah, yeah.
That's yeah, that's God. And there's
There was this really, there's this really important, there's this really great thing that I heard. I think I'm not sure I mentioned it. My friend, I had a friend who is a very successful business owner in Adelaide, and he's Palestinian. And I was like, I just grazed religion just to see like if I could find out what his experience was.
Yeah.
And he, is it all right if I swear?
Yeah.
He just goes, it's bullshit. It's all bullshit. It's nonsense. It's gobbledygook. It's gibberish. It doesn't matter. None of it matters. And I was just like, well, what does? And he just drops the facade, looks at me dead in the eye and goes, every single breath you take.
Yeah.
And I was like, yep, 100%. Like
Cool.
that's it. That's like,
yeah,
it doesn't matter what you believe. It matters engaging it completely honestly. Like everything else after that is in his hands, is with him. It's in that music.
Yeah. And that's ultimately, yeah, too. When you were talking earlier, what that reminds me of is it brings back the faith and the jump thing. And like how you were saying was, without faith, you won't even make the jump.
You won't jump.
It doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to land it, but without faith, you won't even take it. And there's something I've been thinking a lot about, and this goes back to, something that I heard Rob Bell talk about a long time ago, and then came up with in a conversation I had with Nate. But Rob asked the question is fundamentally, he said, and he just, because he drops language too, I think, trying to like become all things to all people, that for the sake of Christ he may win some. So he does sometimes he wouldn't even say God. That's St. Paul, 1 Corinthians 9. So he's like, the universe is it fundamentally one of abundance or scarcity? So what that gets at too is like something Jordan Peterson has asked recently. A lot of people have been saying, and Paul's brought it up: is being good, is being inherently bad?
Yeah.
And I think that plays out in fear, not like the fear of God thing, because that's a more complicated Jewish idea, which may include like the simple shorthand that we colloquially mean by fear, colloquially, but it's something that's more like, what I was thinking about, the jump, right? This faith jump. Faith is fundamentally saying that like whatever happens, I land the jump or I don't, like it's good. Like I'm gonna go. Reality is. Fear is the thing that holds you back. It's just like, what if I don't? It's the thing of like, what if I don't land this jump? And it comes into the last thing I'll say to draw this in. I think this is so huge. I mean, I've been contemplating it ever since we talked about it, but I can't remember which conversation it was with Nate. It's maybe on his channel, but it was with, trying to think of who all was in it, but it's where we talk about the loaves and the fishes, and he brings up this verse, and I had never drawn this connection before, but it's about scarcity and abundance, and it's about reality being good and evil, and it's about fear, because when Jesus, it's an interesting thing. So Jesus, he like feeds the 5,000, right, out of very little, couple loaves, fishes, whatever, I always forget the numbers, and he feeds other people. And then he goes away because they're crowding around him, and he just leaves, and they go across the sea, and Jesus was off somewhere, and they go across, and he's like, I'll meet you over there or whatever. And then they see him coming on the water, right, during the storm, and Peter, it's the whole walking on the water, and they get across, and they're all scared. And I think, and it's the end of the chapter, it's the end of this section, but it says, but it's something that seems out of place, where like they're all full of fear, and the line is, because they had forgotten about the fishes. It just seems like, well, what is he talking about then? And Nate, and I think this is spot on. I think what he's saying there is like, when you when you go to Jesus and you're just like, how are we going to feed all these people? You're fundamentally operating in credo mode, in like, I know knowledge, I have my own understanding. There's 2 fish, there's 3 loaves. There's no way this is going to work, Jesus. Like math. There's only this many calories in the fish. There are this many people. It can't feed all the people. You're thinking in terms of you're in the spirit. This is probably the difference between archonic vision and iconic vision. Is you're thinking like quantities. Like this doesn't work, Jesus, instead of qualitative, which is just like it doesn't matter. The finite full of the infinite. That's the icon. The infinite finite contains infinity. And that's what Jesus is doing in that miracle. He's just like, or when Satan comes to tempt Jesus in the desert, and he's just like, you know, you can turn these stones into bread. And Jesus is like, yeah, I could. But like at that time, he doesn't do it. He doesn't do a miracle. He says, man shall not live by bread alone, by every word that comes from God. And so there's like, and then also when he's walking on the water, he's just like, you don't get it. You don't understand. You're still in this archonic mode of thinking. You're just like people.
The waves of objectives and quantity. That's what an ocean is.
You're in objectivism. You're just like, the waves are dangerous.
Yeah. We're in a storm. Like there's this, there's that, there's this, there's that.
We only have this much food. And Jesus is saying like, no. Consider the lilies.
Yeah. You know? That's Nicaea versus Sophia.
Yeah.
Because you're going like, I want to win. I want this outcome only. This
is sophiology. We've been talking a lot about sophiology recently, which has a lot to do with the divine feminine and Mary and creating space and not being so narrowing. But that's what that is like Mary, the angel comes to her and she doesn't say, but what about this? What about this? What about this? Like, this isn't going to work. I'm not married. Like, this is going to happen. And she just says, let it be according to your word.
Yeah.
Let it be. Like, that's what it is. Yeah. It's receiving and
bearing.
The last thing to close out, one of my favorite texts in the New Testament is James. I think it's James 2. It's in James 2, I believe. But it's receive with meekness the implanted word, which is able to. So it's like,
that's really good.
Receive, accept with meekness the implanted word. It's there. It's already.
There's I'm gonna see if I can make you see it. I managed to find an old icon. It's apparently an artifact. I haven't had it tested or dated, but this is from the 11th century.
Pull it back. Yeah.
So it's a Christ giving. It's the Mother of God giving birth forever. I think it's an Orthodox icon of the Christ child and the Mother seated in the Mother of God.
That's how the Theotokos in Orthodoxy is always represented. There's always he's always
the
holy.
throne. Yeah, the throne of God, like the trueness of it. I think that's like it. Yeah, it's easily like one of my favorite images. Like, I mean, you can really have favorites, but the interesting thing, like, it is interesting how it is like there is the objective, the quantitative, the sort of the rational kind of idea of like you need to gain this one objective. Is the one objective is the hunger, is the food, it's the storm and stuff like that. And the sophiology is like, it's reminding the relationship first. It's remembering the relationship first.
Right. And it doesn't mean you're going to get what you want. Because it's just like the jump thing. Like, you might not make it.
Yeah.
Or you might starve to death.
Yeah.
But like, that's not the point.
Yeah.
Even in that, Christ has conquered death. So that's ultimately faith. And it's not even, and I've often said too, like, faith isn't even believing in the resurrection as like a mechanistic mode. So like, I'll live again. So, okay, so I'll accept death. Because you're still going to die. So like, even that hope is going to go in the ground.
Yeah, well, it's like, it's the idea as well of like, you cannot lean on your own understanding. Like, did you read *Sapiens*?
No.
There's a moment within *Sapiens* where they talk about the problem of changing our society to an agrarian
Okay.
agrarian mode. And the agrarian mode is essentially like, hey, all right, so at the start, we're gonna toil and we're gonna actually like really like work hard to get all the grain planted. But after that grain's planted, I'm gonna be able to take care of my family. I won't even need to worry about it. I'll be able to sit back and do nothing. And what happens? You breed more people.
Yeah.
And more people come, and you're like, oh well, I'll work more and I'll do this more. And the more like you're leaning on your own understanding, and you're never going to be able to actually like receive the contentment, because it's just like, oh, I might starve, oh, I might die. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not the point. Isn't to try to compromise a survival. The point is to try to actually like engage truthfully, engage in a way that it treats the world as if it's real.
Yes.
Like that's what I think the greatest thing that like Paul ever said is like the simplest sentence in the world, when he was like, we were all looking at Jordan Peterson for so long going, what does he mean? Like, what's this patterns? What's these intentions? What's attention? What's cleaning up your room? How are these all things connected? Because we knew that they are. It's the same way that you see your vision.
Yeah.
I don't know where that tree goes. I don't know what that stream's doing there and all of that type of stuff. And then Paul, I can't remember who he was talking to, but he just goes, you see what you're looking at.
Yeah.
And I was just like, yep, that's as true a statement as you can ever get. So it's just like the idea of Christ in my word, the idea of like panentheism, the idea of sort of like actually critiquing this POS theology, like genuinely, is to say like, you need to see what you're looking at, and you need to actually like pay attention to it, because it's not what you think it is. And if you treat it as if you think you know what it is, then you're wrong. Like it's like it like I think it's like it's a true idea. Like I mean, it's not something that I would ever really like blame a person for, because in the same way like Jordan Peterson talks about how it's I'm gonna get the hemispheres wrong. The frame of reality that someone has, left hemisphere, the frame of reality that someone has, to change that is so hard. And so if you question it and if you attack it, then they're like, whoa, like their immediate response is like, it's far easier for me to try to shut someone up than to change my mind.
Yeah.
Especially if that idea is only coming from one person. Then like that's external, that's fear. That's fear again, because it's like external threat. What am I going to do? Quash. Yeah. It's like that moment is where is how you have to change it. It is one of those things where it's like the idea is you need to operate for like always in a sphere of doubt, and like engaging in that mystery, engaging yourself where you don't need to know, where you actually like where you have doubt. That probably leans back again into the fear. But if you don't have that doubt, then you don't have that awe, you don't have that wonder, and like the mosaic won't complete itself.
Yeah, but even what's so crazy is and tell me if you, to me, like doubt though is still doubt, and even deconstruction, like it's still, to me it is still arising out of objectivism. Like you're still, if you're in the realm of doubt, you're still seeking that kind of objective knowledge, whereas like, and I don't know if this is what, but what's coming to mind is the ancient sage, I can't even think of his name, but like who had this, I think it's Dionysius, but the cloud of unknowing. It's not like a and this is why I talk about vision so much. Again, it's not like a certainty or a doubt thing, because I would argue that both of those things are still flowing out of kind of a egoic place, an egoic place of knowing. It's like it's leading with epistemology. Like, how do I know this? Like anyone who's seeking, who's just like thinking from an epistemological type frame, I mean, I would almost argue is just like,
because you're isolating it. You're isolating it. You're isolating it. You're saying this, what do I know? It was like, I know this. This ends here, this ends there. It's like, I talked about the problem that I think the problem I think about the POS theology is becomes quantitative in a very, very particular way, in the same way it's anti-harmony, as in it refuses discordance, it refuses things that don't map onto its main frame and stuff like that. And I was just like, like, to be anti-harmony is to mean that you're not going to call forth to other music. It's like saying, oh, my music is the best because it has the highest notes. It's like, yeah, it reads, it's the loudest, it's this, it's all quantity, it's loud, it's harmony, it's notes, it's everything like that. Like, if it's harmony can't be quantitative. Like, it's against that. It's literally like, it's counterpoint. It's, oh, does that note correspond to the other notes that I'm hearing? Does that note connect?
Fundamentally relational. Yeah.
Fundamentally relational.
Yeah.
And like, I see this problem, not to sort of be too controversial or to bring it into something like that, but with COVID,
yeah,
that's what I see. I see people having solutions that are fundamentally unrelational.
Yeah.
They just go, it's it's this objective, and then we're good.
Yeah.
It's like, once we reach this moment, then it's as if the last 2 years never happened. It's once this moment happens, then we're done. And I'm just like, it's not that I think they could be wrong. It's that that's just not how reality works.
Well, it's kind of like, I don't know, what it reminds me of is what is almost because it seems to me to be the same spirit of your illustration from Sapiens with the agrarian agricultural society, is like, we get here and then like it'll be good and we can
2
stop.
more weeks.
But then you don't. This is the problem, I would say, arguably, with magic or technology. This is what I mean really by technological babble, and I've gotten where I can talk about this in a better way. But it's essentially that, is you think through some means of control, get an expedient result that's then going to allow you to get to some place where Peter Rollins says you fulfill the lack. It's this libidinal pursuit of the lack. Like, what do I want? And then I'm going to use this to get me here, this technology, this magic to get me there. But then the problem with that magic or that technology is it produces unintended side effects.
Yep.
And it produces a myriad of those. And then you use technology to try to deal with those. And then those produce myriad side effects. Then all of a sudden, you're getting this place of like a colossal snowball that is out of control, and everybody is like isolated. It's that Radiohead song of from their OK Computer album. What's the name of it? We're just like, where it ends like with all of them just being like, and everybody on antibiotics, in a cage, on antidepressants.
Yeah. Well, technology comes from technique, and that was actually like Athena. It was the idea of victory. Like, I think the easiest way to think about it is war. Like, if you have two competing principalities fighting for each other and one of them wins, then they're the principality of this new hierarchy, but they don't fit it like the other one did. The other one like was a communication. One was actually ontologically like oriented. Yes. And the moment you screw with that, chaos.
Yeah.
Like, completely, there's no other way to put it. Do you want to keep going? Because I need to go to the bathroom real quick.
Yeah, let's go for a little bit more. I'll pause it. Yeah. We're back.
Yeah, cool. With Techni though, and this is like, I think this is the interesting thing, and I think this is where like you can I can see where people get pushed back for the ideas, and why I think it's inevitably irrelevant. Because in the same way that we talk about the problem with technology and the problem with magic, it doesn't change the fact that magic exists. It doesn't change the fact that technology exists. But what matters is like how we use it, or what we use it to what end, and fundamentally like how we steer that. In the same way that like the shorthand for the music of Aino is Spabimi. I got it from a podcast they call and now Melkor shall say that no man may have no theme may be in the music that hath not its utmost source in me. And those that shall try to control it shall prove but mine instruments in the making of things more beautiful and wonderful than they were before. And like the idea of like technology and magic is a discordant thing, is a corrupting thing, I don't want to say evil because it allows it to be trapped within a category still, but it has a harm to it that should be looked at with a discerning eye, but not at the expense of understanding its relationality in the world. Like we talk about technology, we can talk about the criticisms of technology and the breakdown of community, but like panentheism, I would never have run into it.
Yeah.
Like Jordan Peterson, I would have been an SJW for the whole life.
This whole community is kind of an interesting side thing of that. So do you have you ever watched any videos, or do you know who Nick B is from this little community?
No.
So he was he was like one of the real early randos for a long time. Like I think he's talked to Paul like 7 times or something like that. And he talked a lot about cults. He's an incredibly interesting guy. He's actually he moderated a talk. So like when John Vervaeke did the Q&A on Paul's Discord, Nick was the moderator.
Yeah. And I was drunk at 4 a.m. watching that. It was hilarious. Australia.
So Nick said to me once of this is appropriate to your apropos to your technology thing, is and being careful how we use it. And because I was for the longest time so 2 big personalities, Nick and then Michael Lady, who's on here too in this community, have pushed back on me with this, and it's made me rethink things and it's very in line with Melkor. So like technology, I have a tendency to be more of like a Luddite, even though I use technology. I like in my fantasy world, in my own understanding fantasy world, like I would just live in like a agrarian permaculture commune with just, doing like doing these in a Sophionic community is what people have been calling them recently, biodynamics, all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, I have a friend who builds like an Earthship community in Hobart, like that stuff. Yeah, fantastic.
That's what I would be doing, but I don't. And then Nick said to me once in a comment, like I was making some comment talking about my technological babble and critiquing technique and technology, and he said something like, what is interesting about something like the internet is how do you describe it? Like we got to the point where I'm going to try to relate it to a book where like, and this is connected to even what we were talking about before with podcasts and books, is that you have a book is a technology that can communicate a certain idea and a credo, but it's a very muted transmission of, even if it's art, even if it's true and good, it's a muted transmission of the person. The best forms of books are, I mean, damn near like infinity in them. They're just like the Bible or this, Lord of the Rings, The Road,
Master and Margarita.
Yeah. But then with the internet, what happened is it got to be technology where there was so much information, so much processing, so much thing that like it's almost as if it took all hierarchies and all limitations, because the internet was just boom everything, that it like almost made the landscape like an ocean where it was just like a leveling of everything.
Yeah. Okay.
Out of that, these new potentials have happened. And so it's almost like, I think of it along the lines of like Melkor, like, okay, try to play your different song, build the Tower of Babel, but it's going to end up serving the true song. Yeah. That's all it can do. I mean, what else are you going to do?
What else is there but the truth? Right. It's like, there's just
There's always,
It's like, yeah, believe what you want, but you're still going to breathe. Yeah. That's a really interesting thing. And this goes back to actually what I was saying at the start of it with information versus narrative as well.
yeah.
Technology is about removing yourself from time, or it's about trying to remove yourself from the constraints of the world. Like, you have a certain ability and you want to enhance it. By enhancing it, you're removing yourself from that ability, which is why, like, when you always, like, the picture of someone with the most amount of technology is like in Wall-E, where you see all of these, like, you can do everything you ever want without lifting a finger. And so of course you're going to become like low boned and fat and not going to move. And so the technology, you inversely, you widen the gap between the world and how you affect it and yourself.
Yeah, let garments of skin, right? That's what
Garments of skin is, yeah, to go back to the OG boil on that, it's true. But there's also something about time that I think it does. Like, a book is the easiest example for that. And he said it was, Peugeot actually had this in a Q&A recently, where someone is actually saying this is a very big difference between folk music and classical. Where, like, folk music, like in capoeira, for example, we have basically circular.
Yeah.
Like, and you add things, you can change lyrics, and you can have different calls and responses, but it's all organic. None of it's written down. None of it's really like meant to obey a certain rule.
Mm-hmm.
Classical music, you're meant to obey rules.
Yeah.
Like, have you ever met someone who's been classically trained and hates their musical instrument?
Yeah. Yep.
It's so real, because it's like, you have to do it this way.
Yeah.
But it's and again, like you said, like, I don't think you can. I think essentially it's the same with technology. It's worthy of critique. It's worthy of saying, hey, no, confining and calling this music and like calling that discordant random nonsense is wrong. But it doesn't matter what you say, because you'll still create music that will be fit within this entire moment.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about what the internet does, and like, it creates the ocean, like you were saying, because we are finally able to see what we're looking at. Because before, we were saying, oh, there is only this information, there is only this narrative, there's the news, there's a newspaper, there's my boss, there's my family, there's the books that come out, and there's my book club, there's my church. And that's it. But now information is sprouted up in so many places. Like, combinatorial explosion, it sounds like a theory, it's an experience. It's something that, like, everybody runs into all the time, always. Yeah. Like, and that's the thing that if people pay attention, if people just try to see, that's what's coming forward. Like, the idea of like permanence of text and like all of these different modes of technology, modes of demonstration, like they try to hold time at bay, or they try to capture time. Like, what does Paul call a story? A story is like an essence. It's a compression system.
Oh yeah.
It's a compression system. The compression system is buckling now, and that's where I think the internet is the Gutenberg 2.0, because it's not giving us a greater opportunity to attend to information. It's giving the information an opportunity to cohere to a true narrative. Because, like, at the end of the day, we have combinatorial explosion happening all the time, always. We have top-down influences, we have bottom-up manifestations and changes, and everyone's trying to sort of twist this narrative. But the narrative, the information that is building the narrative, is coming up too fast for people to control now. It's too fast for people to see. So yeah, like I think eventually eventually the reason, like the way that I think that the relationality comes forward, like even though, you know, you're on the other side of the planet, and even though like I'm technically not seeing you, and there's like probably a second delay in like the way that we talk and things like that, we are able to actually, we're going to be able to see relationality as the most important thing again.
Yeah.
Like my favorite Zen koan is I can't remember the monk now. When I was young and before I became a monk, I saw the mountains as just mountains and the streams as just streams. On my way to enlightenment, I saw that the mountains were not just mountains and the trees were not just trees. It's like now that I am enlightened, I see the mountains as mountains and the streams as streams. And it's like, that's where we go. Yeah. It's like we all like we come back to know the place as it truly was. We come back home to know. We go to slay a foe. We go to slay a foe. We go to find ourselves.
Yeah.
I think that's a good place to end it.
No, yeah, it is, man. This is really good talking to you because it is a good place to end it. It is, and I guess just to reiterate your point, to close it out, I mean, it's, you know, getting to know you, this personal thing, you know, we've boxed some, it's not just words on Discord, like it's more relational, it's more personal, and it's you know, by God's grace, I guess it's further up and further in. So this technology, this magic, God uses it good, I guess.
Yeah, that's it. Do what we can.
All right,
Cheers,
I'll
man.
stop it. Yeah.